I've watched loads of tactical 40k videos, but nobody talks about some of the easiest things that we can do to improve. Are you struggling to get the upper hand when you play? Maybe there's more you can do to get on the scoreboard effectively. Games are feeling difficult, or maybe you've just plateaued. Winning isn't everything, but if you want to improve to have more engaging and enjoyable games, then this is the video for you. Hello and welcome to Incursion Tactics. This week, I'll be mostly talking about getting good. More specifically, some self-analysis. I've been playing 40k and running tournaments now for over 10 years. There's been lots of opportunity for reflection in that time. I'm going to share with you some of the best things that I've picked up over the years that have helped me the most. By the end of this video, you'll have a strategy that you could replicate across all of your games, regardless of the faction that you play. Let's get started. Many players focus solely on executing their plan without much consideration of anything else. We can have a more purposeful game by factoring our opponent's tactics and adapting accordingly. I've talked about this before in previous videos, and it bears repeating. If we have a plan, let's say we've got an army with lots of little units that are going to spread out, flood the board, threaten to score primary, we might achieve that on the first turn. But we have an opponent that we're playing against. If they've got lots of effective shooting or combat ways to essentially just delete those off of the objectives, then we've just handed our opponent a bunch of units. We won't then be scoring any primary points. And so we might have an idea or a plan, but we need to envisage how that unfolds and actually, is that realistic? Critical thinking and analysis. Yes, we might have lots of small units that can run about and get objectives, but are they actually going to survive past turn 1, 2, 3? And then thinking about what that means for our longer term ability to score. Maybe we're happy to play a game where we trade off some of these units, score well on primary and deny our opponent some chances to score. Does that actually translate to victory as the game progresses? Yes, we might have got an early lead, but what are we sacrificing over the course of 5 battle rounds? Is this something we can continue to do throughout those later turns? It's constantly evaluating each piece you've got left in the game and thinking, how can I actually leverage this unit to get points? And we should be constantly thinking about that as the game unfolds. And the purpose of this is to really challenge that initial plan. Is it still robust? Bringing it back to the little example I mentioned with the many small units. If they're not very resilient units and they've got to put themselves in harm's way, then actually probably not a very realistic plan. So it's making sure that when we come up with these plans and as the game unfolds, we're constantly being critical of them. Not to doubt ourselves and get in our own heads, but to think, okay, my plan was to do this. Things have changed now. It's turn 3. I've got half my army has gone. I need to reevaluate how I'm using the units in the army to be able to either execute that plan or maybe adjust the plan slightly. Maybe there are some points we can lock up in other parts of the board doing different secondaries. This critical thinking is really important in a game of 40k. It helps to keep the decisions you make honest and meaningful, purposeful, so that you can make effective tactical decisions, and also to react to moments in the game that might not be going the way you want, not just give an emotional response of, oh, that Angron's just wiped out a tank. He just rolled a double 6 to make that charge. That's really annoying. He's killed me. I'm going to just put everything into Angron now just to get rid of him because he shouldn't be there. That's really annoyed me. Well, let's take a step back. Does that forward your game plan? Is that going to derail what your plan was to win the game suddenly? Maybe it wouldn't, and that's the right thing to do. But the key here is to not give an emotional response to things happening in the game just when something doesn't go your way. Blame bad dice, make poor decisions because you're not thinking critically about what we should be doing in the game to either execute our plan or adjust based on new information. It's a really important skill, takes some practice, and one of the things I recommend is trying to approach someone that you play with that is either on the same sort of wavelength as you, also wants to perhaps improve. Invite them to have a game where you play a regular game, but you offer constructive comments and feedback as you're playing the game. Discuss why you're doing things. Is that the right tactical choice? And just reflect on why you're doing things so that it helps get that kind of thought process going as you're playing. So you're not disrupting the flow of the game. It's more having a conversation about why you're making the plays, why you're doing this. What do you think as I'm doing this? Is there anything you might do differently? Practicing that critical thinking in response to things is really, really important. And then it just gets that thought process going in your mind so you can take that away into subsequent games. Really, really important. I mean, I played a game on Epic Flail stream last week. Between chatting to the host and my opponent's turn, I was thinking about where I was going to be bringing units down, how I was going to rapid ingress, planning out shooting in my subsequent turns, moving on to objectives, denying my opponent the ability to score teleport homers. If you're interested in seeing this game, by the way, it's a really awesome game of Genestealer Cults versus Chaos Knights. You can check out Epic Flail in the video description. I'd also swing by Return to the Old World and Board Stupid if you're interested in old world or board game content. You should definitely check them out too. Great friends of the channel. They all make great content. But it's not just thinking about the game during the game. It's really important to have that reflection and that evaluation after the game as well. Take some time to reflect on what went well and what didn't. Did your strategy pay off? Were there any missed opportunities or tactical errors? One really useful way of doing this is writing the scores down. And to help you with that, I've made a downloadable score sheet. If you check out the video description below, it's there for you, really clearly laid out. Spells out all the objectives, takes away a bit of that mental energy of writing out little tables for scoring and what have you. Print a bunch of these off, and then you can keep them to have a little look at how your games went, reflect on your scores, see where there might be some areas for improvement. So please do feel free to take advantage of that free resource there for you. And if you want to show some appreciation, give the video a like while you're there. Or maybe you're someone who prefers an app. And it just so happens there is an excellent app called Tabletop Battles. I'm in no way affiliated with this app, but I do want to showcase it because it is incredibly useful to stockpile data. I have used it a couple of times now, and I think it's really good. What you see in front of you is the interface for it. It gives you this dashboard at the front where you can have a look at your latest game, and it shows a win rate over time. I've only played a handful of games in this app to test it out. Don't get me wrong, I love the score sheet and I will continue to use paper score sheets, but this app is also incredibly useful if you're trying to record and analyze data, having all of your scores at your fingertips. If we tap along to the next page, we get a breakdown of all the games we've played, and then that gives us a further breakdown of all of the stats. As I said, I've only played a handful of games with this so far, kind of exploring it. This isn't all of the games that I've played in recent weeks, but this gives me the snapshot of the ones that I've recorded in here. Top right, you've got win rate, go first win rate, go second win rate, longest streak, your average VP differentials. Lots of data here for you to look at. Crucially, going back to the games section, you can look at any game you've played. Now, forgive me, some of these games are a bit weird in the scoring. There have been some intro games here, some games that I've had to stop halfway through for various reasons. So my view here is a little bit all over the place, but what I can do is I can break down some games that I've played. And if I pick this bottom one here where I was absolutely destroyed by Stuart's Astra Militarum, when I go into the game and I press the eye icon, we can have a look back at this game and say, right, where did it all go wrong? Now obviously I remember playing the game and I know that I went for a play which involved killing a big super heavy, which I knew was a bit of a risky thing to do, but I kind of wanted to do it for science, just to sort of see what would happen and see if I could take that on. Wanted to see how effective the GSC shooting can be. Obviously it didn't go very well and it seriously impacted my ability to get back on the board. But what this is useful for is I made a play in the early turns, it didn't pay off, and I could look at this and think, that's all I've really learnt from this game. I shouldn't have tried to go for the Shadow Sword, just move on. But actually what this is telling me is I still managed to consistently score 8 points on the primary mission every turn from that point. So I had the potential in that game to give Stuart a run for his money. This mission being Purge the Foe and me making a play that didn't pay off, it meant Stuart could really rack up the points on primary. But if I'd been a bit more sensible, a bit more considered, I could have definitely tried to mitigate that. And actually seeing a solid 8 points of being able to hold objectives is really pleasing. You know, my ability to get primary and hold primary was pretty good in that game. And also picking fixed really hurt me. So I was able to get a few points, but ran out of steam almost immediately. Fixed didn't really work for me. I need to unpack why that might be and think about how I approach that in future games. Even though this game was a complete write-off because of the fact that I made some plays that did not work and the game unraveled very quickly to a convincing loss, there's still learning to be had. Let's take my most recent game. Again, I'm going to pick on the games where I lost. Played a really good game against Liam. I was taking a completely different army. You can see here the scores are pretty wild. My secondary game was actually able to score reasonably well up until the point where I ran out of steam. Meant I had a turn of 0 on primary and secondary. Liam played a blinder in as much as I managed to deny him primary every turn of the game, but a big score at the end in his consistent scoring of the secondaries meant it was enough to pip me by a point, and some really good reflections on me. Turn 2 primary, only scoring 5 points. My mission, as you can see from how I've denied primary for Liam over 3 turns, I should be aiming for 10s on each of those. I was in positions to get 10s on primary, but my poor positioning meant that I didn't actually score 10, and I wasted a unit trying to fight in a combat that was really pointless. I had a plan and I didn't stick to it, and I wasn't evaluating that unit moving up. I tried to just get some stuff with Strachan, get some cheap kills, but actually I should have been keeping them on the objective, keeping them alive, trying to continue that pressure of denying primary, and that would have also then in turn helped for the later turns when I start to run out of assets, because basically an infantry spam list and I wasn't able to keep enough units alive near the end of the game just to eke out a couple of more points to then turn this small loss into a small win. And so hopefully you can see how this app is a really useful tool to look at your games, reflect on the individual results of the games, and be able to see the gaps in the scoring. By identifying areas of improvement, you can refine your skills and become a more formidable player. You've got the numbers numbers in front of you in this app, and you can look at where the gaps in your game are effectively. If you consistently see you are struggling to get secondary points, why is that? Are you picking fixed and not quite getting the maximum amount of fixed? Does that mean that those choices are bad? Should you be thinking about maybe going tactical or picking a slightly different fixed mission objective? Whether you're using the downloadable sheet I've shared with you or you're using the app, it's identifying trends, patterns, gaps, and trying to think about how those are happening, why those are happening, and then what you can do differently to try and get those extra points on the board to swing that game in your favour. Tying this all together, that critical thinking and that reflection, constant evaluation, and then the analysis of the actual scores themselves after each game, that gives us an easily applicable strategy that we can apply to all of our games. If you started doing this tomorrow, you would notice over time some very defined improvements as you're able to identify and tackle areas where you can make actionable improvements in your games. Earlier I mentioned how we need to be factoring in what our opponent's doing and why that's important in our games, and that is also very, very true. The self-reflection is so important for our own improvement, but actually when we're playing our games, we need to be thinking about what our opponent's doing, as if we're just ignoring them, well, that is a very quick way to lose a game before a dice has even rolled. And so to help with that, I've made some videos on a range of different phases of the game with focuses on how to play around what our opponents could potentially be up to. And so if you want to level up your critical thinking, you should definitely check those out. I hope the video was useful to you. Thank you so much for watching. Keep rolling those dice and stay tuned for more.